I'd like to welcome everyone to our Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 Board of Education meeting. If I could have everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to have a moment of silence. If we could remember Patricia Pierce, she's the mother of Jody Nowacki, who works as a transportation assistant, and our colleague, Dr. Sharita Troywick, her grandmother, Martha Rudolph, passed away. So if you could keep the Pierce, Nowacki, Treywick, and Rudolph families in your thoughts and prayers, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If I could have somebody move the agenda table, please. Moved by Ms. Flores, second by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns, additions, deletions on the agenda? Seeing none, all is in favor of the agenda. That passes 9-0. And before we roll into our student leaders' comments, I'd just like a few people maybe to come forward. Mr. Henderson, who else is here? Mr. Scally, Mr. Richardson, Michelle Sears, Dr. Zaffetz. As you know, you guys can come on right up front here. We're going to make you all feel important. As you guys know, on Thursday, March 7th at 2:40 p.m., bus 461, a small bus was traveling south on North Greece Road when it was T-boned by a car heading east on Peck Road, which failed to stop at the stop sign. This caused the bus to turn on its side and hit two cars heading north on North Greece Road. We are incredibly proud and grateful for all that was done and want to make sure we recognize some of our people. Dave Richardson and Tom Capon immediately went to the scene when the fire call came in. Tom was able to work with Roger Yeomans to get info about who was on the bus and to get that information to our first responders. Mr. Richardson assisted Tom, as I have the IC command on my phone, and I worked with Superintendent Groutman and Laurel to give updates on what was occurring. Tom Capon went back into the building later that evening and made sure that the one... Mr. Maloney needs a yonder bag. Tom Capon went back to the building later that evening to secure a wheelchair for one of the families. Laurel Hayden, Laurel, you should come up here as well. Worked to coordinate communication and manage incoming calls and providing information to the media that was being requested immediately. John Henderson, Eric Hughes, and Mike Scally showed up to provide support on the scene. Mike Zaffetz, Dr. Zaffetz showed up to lend a hand as well. Scott Moore, who does our risk management, also arrived and was able to get the info he needed to start his insurance reporting. The transportation team back at base went to the dispatch office to help answer phones and make sure all the other runs that afternoon were successful. This was a huge help as their efforts were collective versus those isolated in separate offices. All of our first responders, the Monroe Ambulance, the Greece Police Department, the North Greece Fire District, the Lakeshore Fire District, and the Ridge Road Fire District did a nice job working closely together to triage and manage the incident. Community members like the woman supporting with ASL and Richard Vito, our district psychologist, also supported very early on. I just want to give a heartfelt thanks from the Board of Education and from the Greece community to all of you that did what you did on that day. I want to thank you. And all the reports I got back from my colleagues in the EMS and fire service said you guys did an amazing job, that the incident command system worked to perfection, and I just want to thank you. Thank you. All right, our student leaders at Olympia, welcome this evening.
Hello. Ooh. Hello, my name is Sarika Mafwanami, and I am a senior at Greece Olympia. And here is what's going on in our school for the past couple weeks. So, for the past couple weeks, all you can hear is music floating throughout the halls as Greece Olympia participates in our March Music Madness. Students go ahead and nominate their favorite songs, and staff nominate songs from their graduating year in a battle of the bands. Today was Yeah by Usher against Cupid Shuffle. But other songs have been featured, such as Hey Ya by Outkast, and also Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses. So it's one way that we like to keep Olympia alive and also kind of just cut through all that muddy weather. And I know you've seen all the posters. You cannot stop the beat with the show-stopping performance of Hairspray. For the past couple months, students at Greece Olympia in the music department have delivered show-stopping performances, and we debuted and we opened last weekend with reviews saying that this is the best performance since last year's musical of Shrek the Musical. Olympia's music program is really on the up and up, and if you had not had the chance to see it today, we have 3 performances, Friday at 7 p.m., and also 2 p.m. on Saturday and 7 p.m. on Saturday, with an ASL matinee interpreted performance at 2 p.m. Go and see the musical. It will not be a waste of your time. And lastly, we have started our second session of Extended Day program. 50 middle school and freshman students to go ahead and take some individualized time with teachers to go ahead and gain some extra support in ELA and math. Teachers also use their skills to make sure that all students get a chance to truly succeed at Greece Olympia. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sierra Griffin, and I'm a senior at Greece Olympia. And in addition to the Extended Day program, Olympia is offering a second round of Saturday school dates. Saturday school is open to all high school students, with teachers representing all 4 core subjects. During this time, students can work on getting caught up on their classwork, credit recovery opportunities, and getting caught up on their lab minutes. Next, Olympia recently had a number of students qualify for states in the DECA competition. DECA prepares students to be emerging leaders and entrepreneurs. 4 of our seniors were there from Wednesday to Friday in the competition. Students are presented with hypothetical business problems or situations that they have to figure out how they would respond. They made Olympia very proud. Lastly, community learning meetings. Staff at Olympia have been using their Tuesday staff meeting time to focus on community learning around instruction and student SEL needs. Staff has been focusing on becoming warm demanders and using wise feedback. This month, they are turning their attention to Dr. Green's work in this book, Lost at School, to think about discipline in a different way. Teachers are then tasked to bring this work into their department meetings to think about how to implement the new learning.
Hi, I'm Leah Pollitt, and I'm a senior at Olympia. Recently, our community schools program has been putting together a clothing exchange for the students at our school, and they've recently held a clothing exchange where students can come in and shop for different clothing items that have been donated from the community and look around. The next thing that the community schools program have done is a game day, and they host these things after school for middle school and high school students, and they sign up in advance and play a bunch of different board games, and it's a good way to just get the grades together and have fun after school and relax and rewind. And this is in the cafeteria, and they provide pizza and snacks. The community schools has also held a Zumba class after school, which was a huge hit for the entire school. The Black Student Union helped to host this, and Jakari from East Borda, he works and does classes for Zumba, and they did different exercise classes, and it was a huge hit for the school.
Hi, my name is Kamal Apak, and I am a senior at Olympia High School. It's nice to meet all of you. Let me get started. Spring sports have recently started, and Olympia is thrilled to be partnering with Odyssey to start the girls' flag football program. The team will be coached by Olympia's Mr. Coyne. Many of our girls will be two-sport athletes this season, doing both track and flag football. Olympia can't wait for the first game. Mr. Drew, a music teacher at Olympia, was recently honored with Channel 8's Golden Apple Award. Miss Mesmer's students nominated Mr. Drew for all his hard work and dedication to his students. Mr. Drew is just one example of teachers who are committed to building relationships and holding high expectations. Last Thursday, our seniors had their first of all the exciting events coming up with their senior breakfast. Our senior class is looking forward to prom, senior field day, the trip to Darien Lake, the memory walk through our elementary school buildings, senior conferences, and finally, graduation. And then if everybody wants to come up, we could do the last part all together.
We want to
Thank the board
for all the hard work they do to make all the great things happening at Olympia possible.
If I could have you guys come up front, we'll do a quick picture with the board and your admin team, which again, I'm impressed they're all here. So if they can come and join the board, that'd be great.
Sarika, you look like your Zumbar. Front and center.
All right, moving on, item 2.01, staffing. Can I have somebody move that to the table? Moved by Vice President Moore, seconded by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on staffing? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 9-0. Moving on to 2.02, the frontline security agreement. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Flores, seconded by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 9-0. Assistant Superintendent Larson.
Thank you very much. I am pleased this evening to congratulate and welcome our new Director of School Safety and Security, Casey Vokel. Casey has been working with the Greece Central School District since the beginning of this school year as a district safety officer. He has had the good fortune of using that time to build positive relationships with students, staff, and administrators. Prior to joining the Greece Central School District team, Casey spent 20 years with the Greece Police Department, retiring in May of 2023. He proudly served the residents of this community in numerous assignments and ranks, including patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, and deputy chief. He has been assigned to and supervised officers in road patrol, criminal investigations, internal affairs, and community services. Casey was selected to attend the FBI National Academy in 2018. His successful completion of the 3-month program in Quantico, Virginia, placed him among the top 1% of law enforcement executives in the world. He is also a trained and experienced crisis negotiator and member of the board of the New York Association of Hostage Negotiators since 2015. Casey's most rewarding experience in his career has been helping those in need. He takes pride in being a reliable resource for all that need it. He looks forward to continuing and always improving that effort for our school community and beyond. Most importantly, Casey is joined by his loving family, who are his biggest supporters. This includes his wife, Sarah, a reading teacher at Holmes Road School, and their daughters, Maddie and Libby. Congratulations, Casey.
Casey, I'm going to have you do 2 pictures. First with Deputy Superintendent Smalley and Superintendent Groutman. And then I'm going to have a picture of you, Chatterton, and Henderson. You're fine. Over here. Oh, actually, we should be doing it in front of the sign. The G. Yeah, we're doing it in front of the G, not up front. Yeah, in front of the table. Well, we're just gonna move. I just gotta move. So I'm not. After. You're in the next. I gotta stand in the back. He's never listened. Serve him right up, John. You let him go. All right, now you're up. Now you and Henderson are up.
I don't want to come up anymore. Forget it, it's all over.
You're a rose flanked by thorns. Thank you.
All right, moving on to 4.01, the 24-25 budget update. Superintendent Groutman.
Yes, I'm going to have Mr. Khalili come on up to share just a few minor changes to our budget. As you all know, just as a reminder, we start building the budget early on in the season. So this started back in December, January, and have continued to give pieces, but we're very close to an almost ready budget that I'll be able to present next month. So thank you, Romeo, for the updates and the work up to this point.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I just too want to acknowledge, although we kind of sail along in this process and do good things as we put this together, it's a team effort in our department, and I just want to make sure that we acknowledge everybody on our team. We've got a great staff. I think you all know that, and it makes this a lot easier than it could be. So with that, we are going to do a brief review of where we are with the budget. We're going to take a quick look at the state aid adjustments. It's the last time we met. Talk about some budget adjustments we've made since February 6th, and then just give you a draft budget summary of where we are to date, and then some next steps as well. So when we met back on February 6th was our original and initial rollover. We were balanced at $309.5 million on the revenue side and the expenditure side. We had adjusted for some revenues. We had used the governor's state aid number in there. On the expenditure side, I did want to mention that it included 60 additional positions from ARP. It included all staff members and vacancies in the current school year, accounted for all extra work, substitution work, as well as 23 positions that were added during the 23-24 school year from ARP. So the total ARP positions that are now represented in the current budgets are approximately 83, 84 positions. So we were balanced at February 6th. Touching base on the state aid adjustment, the second column is what the governor proposed for us. You'll see at the bottom it was $156.8 million is what we were using at the time. There's a orange, salmon-colored line across it on building aid. As we met that Friday afternoon, the budget presentation was on Tuesday. Friday, we met with our financial partners. We went through, there is additional building aid that we believe we're going to receive because of final cost reports that will be submitted, that were submitted either at December of '23 or by June of '24. So we've adjusted the governor's number of $10.3 million in building aid to $12.2 million of building aid, which has given us an additional almost $2 million in revenues. With that adjustment, instead of 156.8, we are going to use $158.7 million as state aid for next year. Quick synopsis of what I had just gone over. 23-24 budget, you'll see, was $290.7 million. What we tried to capture here was a kind of a reconciliation, a transparent reconciliation for everyone to know kind of where we made our adjustments. Revenues on the left, expenditures on the right. We started this current year at $290.8 million. On February 6th, we came back at 309.5. The items below are the adjustments we made to the revenues on the left-hand side, and the adjustments we made to expenditures on the right-hand side to get from 290.8 to 309.5. And we were balanced at that point in time. Now getting from 309.5 to 307.8 are the following adjustments. You'll see on the left-hand side, we made revisions and estimate adjustments to the revenue side, as well as adjustments to the expenditure side to get us to $307,787,000 as a budget, and we are balanced at this point in time. I won't go over each of the items, but for the most part, the meeting that we had with our financial partners did have us make adjustments in a variety of areas, including, you'll see on the expenditure, debt service adjustment, and revised, on the revenue side, revised debt service transfer. Those two were really big numbers that brought the budget down from 309 to 307. The other, I did want to go back for one piece here. The other thing I wanted to mention here to note, and I should have highlighted it, is back on February 6th, we were recommending that we would use about just over $3 million from our reserve funds to balance the budget at $309 million. With the additional funding that we're anticipating from building aid, we have taken out, on the left-hand side, you'll see workers' comp reserve and unemployment reserve, 1.5, we've reduced it. So at this point in time, we are not using our reserves to balance the budget for 24-25. That $3 million came off, and we made a couple of revenue adjustments. So again, we're at 307.8, not using any reserves at this point in time. We will save those for future years when we do need it. We look at the revenue draft summary. You can see just some of the things we've talked about. Our state aid is up 6.4. The levy and the tax levy and the STAR, those were brought to the board at the end of February, so those are firm numbers. Federal sources, transfers and internals, those are all the same as they were on February 6th. On the expenditure side, the top portion of this is the same. At this time on February 6th, the bottom portions were yet to be determined. So we've made some adjustments there that were outstanding at the time. One of them is staffing requests, which we did approve at the cabinet level. We've added 4.6 FTEs to the budget for 24-25. The estimated staffing to enrollment adjustment, each year we go through all the enrollments, student enrollments in our courses, make adjustments to staffing as enrollment dictates. At this point in time, we're estimating, based on course enrollment choices, we will reduce approximately 10 teacher positions at about $50,000 is what we use. That's the $500,000. Note point to make on this is those might be reduction of 10 teachers, but they're not any displacements of any physical people out the door. That will be absorbed with resignations, retirements, vacancies, attrition, whatever happens. So although we will reduce a number of teachers, it's not physically anyone leaving the district at this time. Estimated retirement savings are about $620,000. We had about 15 teachers who were retiring. We put an estimate on that equated to about $450,000 in estimated breakage between the outgoing teacher and the incoming teacher. And we had some non-GTA positions that we know are retiring where we're going to capture some breakage in there as well. The total comes to about $620,000. And then the last item that was approved was $75,000. We put in made sure that it was in the budget for yonder pouches if we need to go in that direction for 24, 25. So at the end of the day, we are balanced at $307.8 million with no cuts to staff, no cuts to programs. As I mentioned, there may be changes in course offerings, which would allow for some adjustments in the teaching staff, but there are no people cuts, and any staffing changes that would take place, again, would be via retirement, attrition, and/or resignations. Taking that just a step further, we did want to show this waterfall budget, kind of pictorial on how we got from $290 million budget for 23-24 to our current estimated budget of $307.8 million. You'll see across the bottom the different categories. What I did is I lumped through the bracket on the top, so from salaries up to staff adjustments, you'll see there's $12.5 million of increases related to staffing and benefits associated with that staffing. So out of the $17 million increase, $12.5 million of that staffing is related directly to people and benefits that go with our union contracts to make it a good position for folks here at the district. A draft summary of where we will be, somewhere close. Operating budget goes to $307.8 million. It's a $17 million increase, just under 6%, 5.86% increase budget to budget. Our estimated tax levy is $125,481,000. That's up $3.1 million, or about 2.59, almost 2.6%. Okay. And then lastly, next steps. So the legislative budget is due by law by April 1st. We're not sure if that's going to happen or not. It's likely that it may not, but hopefully we'll be close. So with that in mind, second bullet, so the expenditure, a couple things to note here. We are moving the budget from our development area to the live portion of the budget in order to generate numbers for the superintendent's recommended budget. Expenditure budget categories, salaries, healthcare, Social Security, ERS, TRS, those category amounts may change as a result of the transition within our system into the live general fund budget, but the total is likely to remain the same. So we may have said that salaries were $149.5 million, but they may be $150.2, but something else would have gone down, but the bottom line will likely be $307.8 million. On the revenue side, revenue budget is likely to change as a result of the legislative but it will be balanced to that final $307.8 million expenditure amount. Based on the one-house budget that we've seen lately, it's possible, I don't know if it's probable, that they may restore foundation aid to the way that it, without the CPI adjustment and without the hold harmless. If they were to do that, we would see another $1.6, $1.7 million on state aid. What we would do is reduce some of our other revenues by the 1.5 or 1.6, 1.7, increase our state aid by 1.6, 1.7, and leave the total budget at $307.8 million going forward. And any adjustments that we need to make when the budget comes out from the legislature, we will share with the board in a short presentation to show the changes from tonight to get to the superintendent's recommended budget on April 9th.
Questions? Dr. Haywick?
Just one thing. So I know you said we're not displacing anybody's, and cutting those salaries and positions. Just a question for clarification. So as we're bringing new teachers in, we're recruiting them, how do we budget for that? Like we have certain positions that are open. So obviously, we're constantly recruiting.
Correct.
So is that in a different part of the
No,
budget?
it's within there. So all
Okay.
positions that exist today, whether they're filled or vacant, are included in the budget. So as people leave, that becomes a vacancy, the money stays within the budget. So when Sharita comes in, you're utilizing those dollars that have already been budgeted. It's already in there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bonagario?
I might need you to clarify, I do need you to clarify a couple of items, and it relates to the core of my question. So there's other local sources apart from the levy, and the transfers in internal. Can you just explain how,
Give me a second
what they
to
are?
find what page,
It's on page 7,
just so I can see what you're looking at.
yeah.
Which one are you looking at?
So other local sources, what constitutes other local sources?
Those would be sales tax, interest earnings, health and welfare services, tuitions we charge other districts. It's a laundry list of 15 or 20 other revenues. This is all combined to come up to the $19.9 million.
Thanks. And if I remember right, we don't have pilots currently, is that right?
We do have pilots.
We do.
Pilots is in that number.
It is in that,
Correct.
okay. If I can just follow on that.
Sure.
Emma. So, we have a total budget-to-budget increase of about 5.9% and about 2.6% from, 2.6% from an increase in the tax levy.
Correct.
And I'm just calculating about 2.9% in increase from those other local sources plus the increase in the levy. So there's an increase amount beyond that, right? I'm wondering if the state,
Just clarification, the
Yeah.
budget increase of 5.9
Right.
includes the increase in the levy. They're
yes,
just on separates, they're on
Yes.
just revenue versus, okay.
right,
I just didn't want to have folks think it's 6% plus the 2 point.
gotcha,
that
right,
it's 8.
right. So I'm just wondering if the state budget gets tight again, and hopefully that's just a hypothetical, do we have flexibility, because in order to make that up, well, we can't make it up, we don't have the other sources coming in. So do we have flexibility in the budget to, you're talking about staffing, to avoid reductions in staffing in that case, or are we just dependent on that
If the
extra
state budget
aid?
got tight,
Yeah,
so there'd be 2 options for us, maybe 3. One, to look at staffing in another view and make decisions on, are we right-sized for staffing, or should we make some adjustments downward or not? 2, we could use reserve funds for a while to fill that gap. Or 3, if we had to make adjustments, we could carve out vacancies as opposed to people who are actually in positions if we needed to do that.
so we do have some
And
flexibility.
I would say there are other areas within the budget that if we prioritize that we needed to have staffing, we could go to non-staffing type categories, buildings and grounds, transportation,
yeah.
and make adjustments on that side to transfer over to staffing and teacher staffing and make adjustments that way. So I think there's a lot of levers for us to use. If there was a state gap of, I'm going to just say a few $1 million, without it being $15 or $20 million, that would be a hardship for any district. If we were short a couple $1 million on state aid from where we thought we could handle that for a number of years fairly, we can accommodate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have one. You mentioned with the reduction in 10 teaching positions, we're not cutting any music programs or anything like that. There's been some speculation on social media that we're cutting
No,
music.
not at this point in time, no.
And there's no
Not for
plan.
the 24-25 budget. There are no cuts in music or any other programs. There may be some shifts, but there's no cuts.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 4.02, leadership update. Can I move that to or Superintendent Groutman?
I'm going to have Mr. Smalling and Mr. Fleming come on up. So just a bit of context in terms of this presentation. One thing that is really important to just note is our strong belief in this district that leadership matters. We have done a ton of work as a leadership team, particularly around the idea that if we create the conditions, the right conditions for our leaders, and if we create the right conditions for our teachers, that we will do better by our students. And we work really hard through a number of different structures and ways with a leadership team so that we can have the best impact possible on our students. So what we wanted to do tonight is just highlight really what that work is looking like this year, and it anchors back to the beginning of the year in terms of opening day, when we really started looking at the idea of high-functioning teams, and really what brought us to that theme of Better Together this year. So thanks for the work that you've done up to this point, because it's been pretty Herculean work with a group of people, and I know it's continuing on because we're mapping this out to our Summer Leadership Academy. So thank you for your work and for the presentation.
So good evening. So Mark and I are very excited to share what our leadership work has looked like really since it really starts at the end of July at our Summer Leadership Academy, and then just continues throughout the whole year. Before I jump into that, I think it's important to recognize just the amazing group of dedicated and really smart group of district and building leaders that are part of our leadership planning team. So Mark and I are sharing, but really the work that we're going to talk about tonight has come from a really strong leadership planning team that meets twice a week during the day, a smaller group, and then a much larger group that comes together at least twice a month before our leadership meetings. That leadership planning team consists of Mark Fleming, our Director of School Improvement. It also has our two Executive Directors of Instruction, Suzanne Pettifer, Todd Smith, Christine Baker, our Director of Student Services, Stacy Brindisi, our Executive Director of Special Education or Pupil Personnel Services. We also have our principal leaders, which is Michelle Barton, Mr. Michael Ferris, and Brian Lum. Cedric Simmons, our Director of Equity, Tom Mariano, our Executive Director of Technology, and many of our cabinet members. Dr. Zaffitz is there frequently meeting with us, Dr. Colicchio and Dr. Vale Payne. And the reason why I'm sharing all that is this work can't survive just with one or two people putting this together on their own in a vacuum. We need the input from all the various stakeholders to come together and share what our focus needs to be for leadership. So our work this year, as Kathy mentioned, with our leadership team has been really focused on culture. And when you look at our focus area, it's really building the capacity of our leaders, building leaders, district leaders, to create a culture of professional learning, collaboration, self-reflection, and feedback. And that focus area just doesn't get randomly selected by a group of us deciding what to do next with our leaders. This is that group of people coming together and analyzing the work that we're currently doing throughout our leadership meetings, taking feedback from our colleagues that are in the buildings and in the district. We look at our school improvement process. We have student reviews where we're constantly hearing not only from our building leaders, but also from the teachers that are in the buildings doing the work. And when we take that work and we gather and put it together, what we want to do is get a better understanding of our current state. What does our work currently look like compared to our vision of where we want to be? And through that process, we identify this focus area that then sets the work, like I said, started in summer leadership and will continue throughout this year. And we're already starting to have conversations of now, and Mark will talk about this shortly, of what will our focus continue to look like as we go into summer leadership for next year. One critical part of that work is for us to ensure coherence. As you choose focus areas, we have to ensure that the work that we're doing is going to continue currently, and then how do we build off of that work as we go into the following years. And that's an important part of our leadership planning team, is to always push to get better and looking for those leverage points, but also ensure coherence, so we're not skipping from one focus area to the next year to year. So to help us with that process, we follow what's called a theory of action, and it sounds really complex, but it's not. It really is just beginning with the end in mind, and it's a simple if-then statement. So when you look here, what we, through a process where we landed is we felt that if we could really take time to build the capacity of our leaders, like I mentioned before, to create this culture of professional learning, collaboration, self-reflection, and feedback. If we did that, then our teachers in the buildings will then be able to collaboratively work as a team to determine what students need based on evidence of their learning. We also felt that then our teachers would be able to collectively understand the rigor of the standards and the outcomes that they're teaching, and that they will be able to use evidence of student learning to drive their instruction. So our hope is if we could create that environment as leaders within our district, within the schools, then our teachers will have that environment to do those 3 bullets that I just mentioned there. So our leadership team meets formally twice a month on Thursday afternoons, 3:30 to 5:30. And each of these meetings are planned under the umbrella of our leadership focus area and our 6 circles leadership, it's our framework. And it's commonly known now as above and below the green line. So all of these circles, or these 6 circles, they're critical. However, in the past, our greatest amount of explicit attention has really focused on the top 3 domains that you see there: pattern, structure, and process. These circles are, they are concrete and measurable. It's really what is done on a daily basis, what our leaders do, right? But what we know is that those circles alone will not be enough to sustain the change that we're looking to do that will actually lead to the most improvement of our students, which is where the bottom 3 circles, they really relate to building that social infrastructure within our schools. Below the green line are the influences that operate beneath those top circles. That's relationships, information, and identity. Those are vital resources that fuel the organization, our success, and our processes within the buildings. So what I'd like to do now is ask Mark to come up, and he'll talk a little bit more about these 6 circles and how that has led to our leadership work with our leaders since September.
Thank you, Jeremy, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you a little bit about the work that we're doing in leadership this year. So as Jeremy mentioned, leadership is kind of a long-standing process and structure that we've had here in Greece. It really brings together all of our administrators from throughout the district, both district level and building level, so roughly just over 80 people, and we do meet twice a month. There's really 2 main goals that we address during these sessions. One is to make sure that all of our leaders are anchored into our district priorities, so we're constantly circling back to the strategic plan and making sure that all of our leaders are really grounded in that work. And then we're offering professional development to those leaders to make sure they understand that work and that they know how to disseminate that work down to our schools. There are 4 different learning targets that we've identified for leadership, and this has really kind of guided our work throughout the year. The first is to identify and describe what makes a really good, high-functioning team, really understand what that team would look like and what the implications are. The second learning target that we've been anchored into for the year is to identify what those teams are doing. What are the best practices of those teams, particularly the teams that we already have within our system, and how can we expand that and grow that throughout an entire system. Our third learning target is to provide our leaders, particularly at the building level, with some professional guidance on the development of their school improvement plan. And finally, we want to explore how to incorporate high-functioning teams into our school improvement plans for the 24-25 school year. So let's talk a little bit about how each of these learning targets have played out throughout the year. As Jeremy mentioned, we're looking through that frame of below the green line and above the green line. So we started our work in the fall looking below the green line, and we really focused on what it means to be a high-functioning team, and we anchored into the work of Dr. Amy Edmondson and Dr. John Hattie. Dr. Edmondson is a professor at the Harvard Business School, and her work there, The Fearless Organization, is a pretty popular text amongst leaders of Fortune 500 companies and educators as well. And in this text, she talks about the notion of psychological safety. So we spent some time exploring that and defining that term. And really what Dr. Edmondson says here is that members of a team can be themselves. They feel free to ask questions, to take risks, to raise concerns if they have any. It's not about being fake nice. It's not about brushing problems under the rug. It's really about a team having a healthy and honest discourse amongst that team. We then anchored into the work of Dr. Hattie, and his defining text is Visible Learning. It's this very thick tome, and his work is really much more focused on educational practice. So what are the moves that a teacher makes that helps to maximize student outcomes? He really hones in on this notion of collective efficacy, and that is this idea that a team has the power to reach a goal. Right? So that sounds really, really simple, but if we break it down a little bit, there's a nice quote from him here from 2018. What he says is that success and failure in student learning is more about what educators did or did not do. So we don't let all of those things that kind of get in the way or that maybe sometimes we grumble about getting in the way of student performance, we don't let that become an obstacle. Instead, we focus on that notion of what can I do as a practitioner, as a teacher, as an instructor to make sure that students are achieving at high levels. And teachers really place that value in working together and having that discourse in order to help maximize student achievement. So we looked through next, through the lens of Dr. Edmondson and Dr. Hattie, at the work of Rick Dufour, and he's really well known for professional learning communities. So I have a definition here for you: an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students they serve. Here we're starting to shift now to a little bit of that above the green line, some of that structure. How do we apply the work of Edmondson and Hattie into PLCs? You look at that definition, it might not be super helpful, so let's break that down a little bit through the 5 steps of how a PLC operates. I think that'll give you a little bit of a better understanding. So first of all, a team of teachers who all teach the same thing, let's say Global History 10. They're going to unpack standards and identify the essential content. So they'll take a look at what New York State says, here's what you need to know, and they're going to zero in on this is what our kids need to know and be able to do. They have those conversations and they agree upon them. They then go and teach it. And this is where the art of teaching really comes into play. Okay, so teacher A may say, I'm going to teach this content that we've agreed upon in this way. Teacher B may say, well, I'm going to teach it this way. They'll run the gamut from direct instruction to cooperative learning and everything in between. They're then going to come back and they're going to create what's known as a common formative assessment. This will be the exact same test that they're going to give to every single student. They take that essential content, they turn it into assessment, and they're going to give it on an agreed upon day. They give the assessment, then they come back again, those teachers, and meet and analyze the data and compare results. And this is where that work of Hattie and Edmondson is so essential, because you have to have those honest conversations in a safe environment. And you have to also believe that you have some collective efficacy. Why? Because now they're going to take that data and they're going to adjust their instruction to meet the needs of all learners. Teacher A may have amazing results, teacher B may not. Teacher B is going to ask teacher A, hey, what did you do differently that I didn't do to get these results? Or maybe they've got similar results, but they each have pockets of students that didn't perform well. That notion of collective efficacy doesn't say, throw up your hands and let's move on. No, it says, what are we going to do differently for those students in each of these classes that didn't meet the grade? So again, I call your attention back to this quote. This notion of collective efficacy and psychological safety is just so essential. That notion that teachers and their actions have the capacity to affect student learning. So that's really the work that we did from the early fall into January, really looking at what it means to be on a high-functioning team and how we can apply that to the work of Rick Dufour and his research on PLCs. We then shifted just last month to kind of the second phase of what we've been doing in leadership, and that's school improvement planning. So now we want to apply that learning that we did throughout the fall and early winter and really discuss what does that mean for the work that we want to do in 24 and 25 as we start to write our school improvement plans. There are 3 different goals that our schools have been charged with to articulate within their school improvement plans: an achievement goal, a PLC goal, and a special education goal. For their achievement goal, school teams have been instructed to address at least one deficit area from New York State. So maybe it's performance on that 5th grade math assessment. Maybe it's the number of students passing the Algebra Regents exam. Where are we falling short, and what are you going to hone in on? What are the specific action steps you're going to take to help reach that goal? Our second goal is also directly tied to the work we've been doing in leadership. What are the moves you're going to make in your building to help create high-functioning PLCs that can allow for that discourse amongst teachers and help to drive student performance? And then our final goal is related to special education and the notion of integrating our special education students throughout our system. In addition to the work that we've been doing in leadership, we're also offering different support systems as as administrators and their teacher teams start to develop their school improvement plans. One is our data dive days. We've been doing these for a few years now. And this is an opportunity for administrators and a teacher team that they've selected to come together and look at relevant data. So in the fall, we kicked this off yet again for this school year. Took a look at some achievement data and applied that to this year's school improvement plan, but we're now already shifting and looking at data to determine what are the specific goals that we're going to create for our school improvement plan for next year. It's a great opportunity for teachers and admins to look at data together. It's also a great way to model that PLC process that we've been utilizing and talking about throughout leadership. We have also started to offer SIP support sessions. We had our first one just last week. And this was dedicated work time for for administrators to really start to dig into their school improvement planning goals, and they could bring whomever they wanted to this SIP support session. So we had some schools choose to bring teachers and even parents from their school improvement team to dig into data and start to specify what their goals will be within those 3 buckets that I shared with you earlier. And then, as was mentioned earlier by Jeremy, we really are trying to make sure that we are coherent. So this work that we're doing with our SIP support, our data dive days, and our leadership will all start to trickle down into our buildings, and that work begins at our Summer Leadership Academy. As I think most of you know, this is our week-long professional development series where admins and teachers come together. We'll dig further into this work and really extend that learning from our leadership series and really start to kick off the work that the school improvement plans for 24-25 articulate. So hopefully you can see that really what our leadership series is trying to do is really address both those below the green line and above the green line priorities that are articulated in the graphic that you see in front of you, making sure that teachers have and admin teams have the information they need to make decisions that are going to help drive student success forward, making sure that teams have the skills that they need to function well, but also making sure that we build in those structures that allow for that teacher collaboration. Any questions?
Mr. Butler?
Thanks for that. I appreciated the explanation. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what's meant by identity below the green line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question here. So if I kind of put that graphic back up, I think the notion of identity there is really understanding who we are as a school culture. What are our values? What's our mission and vision within our school? That mission and vision certainly is set by the district with the strategic plan, but then that's, it's going to be a little different at each school. And so I think when that culture is defined and when people understand how their own skill set fits within that school system and within that culture, then they're more likely to feel like they're a part of the system, and then they're more likely to collaborate. You want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, it also is really getting at what drives people to come to work every day. And so how do you attach the right information that's going to be user-friendly that is actually then going to motivate people based on really, why do you come to work every day? Why did you become a teacher? When that's clear and you believe that going back to collective efficacy, that you can make a difference, then the information that you have and the relationship that you have will drive then your motivation to participate in the different structures and processes that are kind of laid out in the school. So it does get down to the person too, of who they are as a teacher.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I think the below the green line stuff is like absolute prerequisites to get to the above the green line stuff too, so I'm glad you're focusing on that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Bonagoro?
Thank you. I appreciate the process of unpacking the standards and testing the approaches. We've talked a lot about the application of the science of reading over the past year, and it's undergirded by a mountain of research going back literally decades. We've made the change over the course of I know the process was in place, but we implemented it over the course of the past year. And the state has actually just more recently stepped in. One of the key elements of that is the faithful with fidelity application of these strategies. So I'm wondering, when we look at this 5-step process, does that create an opportunity for teachers to, we're working with this rigorous curriculum. Does it create opportunities for teachers to say, I'm not sure, I'd rather do it this way? Am I misunderstanding that, or?
Yeah, I don't think it creates those opportunities. I think because, the reading programs that we're using, the American Reading Company, for instance, is very much invested in the PLC format, right? So they're going to tell you that having teachers come together and having discourse about teaching practices and student work is absolutely the method you should be following when implementing this program. What I would add is that, if a teacher tends to kind of deviate or stray from kind of what the prescribed system is, for instance, in our core, that's probably going to bear itself out in the results, right? And they may not even realize that if they're not coming together in that PLC and having those discussions. So if I deviate, Jeremy doesn't, we come together and have those conversations, I'm going to hear from him that, hey, I'm following the step-by-step process here, and these are the results that I'm getting. So that's going to help keep me on my game and make sure that I'm adhering to how the system is prescribed.
So it's, in a sense, kind of guardrails to the process.
Absolutely.
I was going to, and also, just remember that this is a district-wide, this is what we're looking to see in all schools. So yes, in our elementary, we have a program, our curriculum that they're following, but Mark mentioned, we have others in secondary where you might have a set of standards and outcomes that we're looking to follow, where there's not necessarily prescribed curriculum that you're looking for. And what this will do is actually ensure that the rigor of those standards are actually being met, because you're defining them prior to, at the start of your PLC work. So on one end, it actually keeps people focused on the curriculum when there is one, a prescribed one, and then in other areas, in other content areas, especially in the secondary, it helps keep focus on not only the standard, but the rigor of the standard, which is a piece that I think we need to get back to.
Thank you.
Dr. Sherwick?
So mine is more of a comment than a question. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking time to do this work. I think as someone who has the opportunity to sit at various leadership tables, we are all struggling with how do you keep people engaged in the work? Many times people see the outcomes and the numbers or what have you, and they think people aren't engaged and, no work is being done. But this actually keeps people connected. So thank you for that. It's very important. It takes a lot of time and investment. I don't know if pre-COVID we were as invested as we are now. And at any given moment, I just want to, just take a moment and just show you what's in my purse. I promise it won't take more than a second. The Bulletproof Leader, because we're all searching for answers, and Harvard Business Review on leadership, right? Because we all, again, are trying to keep people, give them voice, keep them connected, and keep the productivity, in this case, for our students and our families. And I think people miss that. I think they miss the fact that we have to, in addition to educating the students, we have to stay on our toes and be able to have those strategies at hand to keep our structure in place and keep people engaged. So not to do the purse demonstration like the old grandma, look what I got in my purse. But I was sitting here when I saw the presentation, I'm like, I need to pay attention to this, see what I can pull from it. But thank you, because this is an investment in time outside of what you all normally are getting paid to do so that we can keep going, right? So we can keep our numbers up and keep our folks invested. So kudos to you all and the work that's being done on leadership, period.
Thank you.
Ms. Flores?
Thanks for the information on this. This is great. I had the pleasure of going to English Village recently and visiting 4 kindergarten classes as they did their ARC core time, and noticed the difference. As much as what they were teaching was the same, and the structure and the pattern was the same, the way that the teachers developed it, or the way that they delivered it to the students, or how they got them engaged, was all each their very own. So I guess I'm a little bit curious. In leadership, we do have to have structure, pattern, and process, and we are looking to develop these high-performing teams. What are the things that we're doing to ensure that our teaching staff has the ability to take their best features and utilize it to teach a very diverse group of students who learn in so many different ways?
It's a great question. So this work's not being done in isolation. We have been partnering with the GT Executive Leadership to kind of make them aware of the work that we want to do, have received feedback from them, and we've created what we're calling a guiding coalition, which is made up of administrators and teachers that's focused on implementing PLCs and rebooting PLCs within our schools. We just had another meeting today, actually, and I said to them, we need you to be champions of this work, which they are, but we also need you to speak truth to power. So what are the things that maybe we don't always see in our leadership bubble that you see in your classroom? What are the structures, the processes, the supports that you need in order to do this work correctly? And it'll be a process. It's not something that gets fixed overnight. We work in a system that has contracts and rules, and so we have to work together to make sure that we can fit what we want to do within that system. But I think we have the right people at the table to make that happen.
The ultimate vision of PLCs, and this is really what the message that we've been working with our leaders on, is PLCs, when they're done the right way as a community, it empowers teachers. The ultimate goal is that teachers do get the right information that's useful for them so that they could take that and then they now are empowered to make those decisions of what students need as a team and not waiting for somebody to direct them. So we're trying to shift the idea that PLCs are not something we're doing to you, that you have to follow this, this, and this as a part of a structure. Our ultimate goal is that they understand that this is about empowerment. and giving them the right information so that they could be their best, work together. And psychological safety is critical with that, because that's where people are comfortable to take initiative, do some things differently, and ultimately compare it to results. And then when the results aren't where they need to be, they come back and are comfortable enough to do what Mark said, is what are you doing that's different than what I'm doing to get those results? But they first have to have trust and feel good working as a team to be able to accept that feedback. And that's hard work.
Mr. Bonagario?
You might have just answered my question regarding Amy Edmondson with that answer, but elaborate if not. But I'm familiar with John Hattie, not so with Amy Edmondson. I was going to ask, what one or two qualities of their work led the team to anchor in on their work? And you might have just answered part of it or all of it with your last comment for her.
Personally, it was, we have talked about PLC for years, but it never's gotten to the place where we know it's most successful. And when you break that down, I was a building principal, Mark was a building principal. The structures are easy to put together when it comes to a PLC. You could easily give directions on what it is, but the missing piece has been this psychological safety, this ability just to be who you are and be open to feedback and willing to say, I tried this and it didn't work. She gives a lot of studies in hospitals where the most successful hospitals are the ones that have actually been identified to make the most mistakes, and that's because they actually talk about their mistakes. The hospitals that she spoke about were the ones where there was no mistakes recorded. That's because there was no psychological safety, and that was actually doing harm. It gives the examples to babies, because the nurses who had the information were afraid to speak up and tell their superiors, in the hospital about things that they could do better. We want that. We want to know what leaders want to know. What do you need? What can we do better? That was we felt was the missing ingredient with the PLCs. It wasn't the structure and the process. It was the psychological safety and the trust.
One follow-up?
Sure.
So is this something that you'll be able to come back to us periodically and talk about how we're doing with that, and maybe are there measurables that, because this sounds really valuable and really good work.
Yeah, absolutely. The intent, as I said, is to carry this work into summer leadership. We've created, kind of an ultimate vision for what we want our PLCs to look like, and it's work that's going to carry into next school year and beyond is really our intent, because we do believe that this is the right work to address student achievement.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 5.01, annual legal notice. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, second by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to 5.02, acceptance of the 23-24 internal audit risk assessment report. Moved by Vice President Malor, second by Ms. Flores. Any comments, questions, concerns on this? Ms. Flores.
Thank you. The audit committee had the pleasure of meeting yesterday and went through audit notes for our audit committee. We discussed the annual update to the internal risk assessment, reviewed the internal audit work plan, and received updates on the status of our corrective action plan. Representatives from Bonadillo Group, which is a third party that works with GCSD, reviewed our risk scores, which identify different types of risk that we are susceptible to, such as environmental risk, things like effectiveness of our control activities, and some things such as IT risks pertaining to maybe access vulnerability, just to name a few. With those, they are reviewed for specific types of functions within the district. So we may look at revenues, we may look at payroll and HR, or federal and state aid. Our audit reps at Bonadillo noted that GCSD has no high-risk findings and low overall risk scores, and fared extremely well comparison to our other districts locally. The internal audit work report the internal audit work plan report recommended several areas for the next things that we take a look at to audit. And it's based on risk opportunities, things that we haven't maybe looked at recently that we should look at on a periodic basis. The audit committee reviewed those recommendations and determined that we would like to, for our next audit, take a look at procurement activities, which Bonadio Group will be assisting us with. For our corrective action plan, the statuses were updated on a number of the items that are within the plan that is currently existing. Several areas such as our excess school lunch funds, which is an ongoing issue and constantly being looked at. Our inventory records for our IT assets, which has been completed and will actually be removed from our corrective action plan. And the approval process and financial statement preparations for things with our fundraisers that are pertain to our extracurricular classroom activity funds. So overall, the audit committee does recommend, which is on our agenda this evening, that we approve the internal audit committee recommending, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. The internal audit committee recommends that the board accepts the internal audit risk assessment report that is up this evening to allow us to go forward and take a look at our procurement activities, see if we're doing anything out of the ordinary. So
Thank you, Ms.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to budget status report. Budget and status report, that's written information only. Does anybody have any questions? All right, moving on, consent agenda. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Dr. Trewick, second by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 7-0, 9-0, excuse me. And with that, Mr. Maloney. Is there a second? Mrs. Farmer? All those in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.